Hey everybody, it's Glenn back in this video to count down to the release of the X-Men Apocalypse movie with a series of videos reviewing the action figures from the movie. Yet, as you may or may not know, there ain't any. So instead I'm stretching the clock back toy rewind style by selecting a number of characters from the movie and for each selected a previous plastic incarnation of the characters. Kicking it off with Jean! In the form of the Marvel Legends Blob series Jean Grey from back in 2007. Marking what were at that time post-Toy Biz only the second series of Hasbro's Marvel Legends, and personally as a long-time collector back then, stuck in my ways and shaking my fist like an old fart, Hasbro's Marvel Legends, get off my lawn! It's taken me nearly a decade to warm to them, which is just as well now I have, as we're currently swimming in them. Beyond the Blob Build-A-Figure, which was an eyeful in itself, the series consisted of She-Hulk, Odin's Son, Ultimate Wolverine, Jean Grey, Yellow Jacket. Then as I pan across, Fred J. Duke's Sexy Pegs. For rounding out the series were Zorn, Pietro, and the Juggernaut. Bitch. Then here's the cardback bio summing up the Dark Phoenix saga, albeit filtered through the lens of the X-Men movies. I won't read it to you because if you don't know the Dark Phoenix saga, then frankly shame on you. Immediately pause and read this now. So here is Jean out of packaging. Although never referred to as such, she narratively represents Dark Phoenix from the third X-Men movie, X-Men The Last Stand. A movie that has a bit of a bad rep and often lumped in with X-Men Origins Wolverine, but come on, it ain't quite that bad. Even if you think it is, you can sleep well tonight in knowing that the X-Men Days of Future Past movie wiped it out of continuity. In the comics, Phoenix wore a signature green costume, changed to a red one when she succumbed to her internal destructive nature, or succumbed to the latter retconned external cosmic force that only used her as a vessel so Marvel could bring the character back and absolve her of wiping out an entire populated star system. Whew, boy, and they say Fox shat on the Dark Phoenix saga. Marvel Comics did that themselves. But I digress. Just as visually the trench coat corset combo of the movie design and its figure does, with the only remaining nod to the Dark Phoenix of the comics being the color red. And in fact, a variant was also released, pictured on the right of the screen here. In its deco, it was designed to depict Jean utilizing her power, which in practice on the variant translated to her hands having more of an ashen deco. Then with the face, I think they were aiming for this, but instead ended up with a Jean who either looks like she parties too hard or is victim of spousal abuse. Yet that deco aside, the head is where this action figure has always drawn most criticism because Famke Janssen, the woman who plays Jean in the X-Men movies, she's a lovely looking lady, right? But in Hasbro's hands I see less of her and more of a manically depressed, anorexic David Duchovny in drag, which needless to say I think Cyclops and Wolverine won't be fighting over her or him. Now looking at articulation, and her head rotation is inhibited by the way her hair flows down the back and either side of her face, and then her head does hinge forward slightly, but not so much back. Then at the shoulder her arms rotate and then they hinge up to just slightly less than a right angle to her body. Then at the elbow we get an early example of what we christened a Hasbro joint, where it rotates and hinges. Then at the wrist her hands rotate, and yep, there's also a wrist hinge moving the hand up and down, which, pun intended, is handy for getting her into a using her telekinesis kind of pose. Or not. Then at the waist she rotates, and in addition to that she also has a diaphragm joint which has some slight rotation to it, but I think is more to hinge forward and backwards, although it doesn't do either of those things particularly well. Then I hate to deny Jean her modesty, but let's see what's going on under her skirt in terms of hip articulation. The legs move out to the side this much, and then they move this far forward, and then they move this far back. There is, yep, upper leg rotation underneath there, followed by a double jointed knee. Then at the ankle, her feet are hinged, moving backwards and forwards, but no ankle pivot. Boo. You know, all things considered, and she isn't as bad as I remember. I think back then she might have got caught up in the David versus Goliath sentiment of Hasbro swooping in and taking the Marvel action figure license from Toy Biz, but don't get me wrong, she ain't great. Yet right now I'd take even bad X-Men movie action figures over no X-Men movie action figures, which is alas the current state of play. Anyway, next up will be Quicksilver. In the meantime, click the video on the right to wind the clock back even further to a toy rewind which featured Jean Grey from the first X-Men movie. And I hope to see you all next time. Bye.